Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. It is 4 o'clock, and this is the regular board meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak, and if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So if the other commissioners could identify themselves after myself, Jeff Randall, Commissioner for District 1 and President of the Board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
We are all present and accounted for. How are you, gentlemen? And agenda review. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. We have an approved agenda. Okay, give me just a second here. I got to move my screen around a little bit. Okay, now is the time for public comment for items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda. The public comment period allows members of the public to comment, limited to 3 minutes each, on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president and are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After an initial warning by the president, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. Okay. If anybody else could just assist me with,
There's no one from the public in the room.
Okay. Okay. And I'll see if anybody sees on screen, folks. I'm not seeing anything.
There's a couple of phone numbers. Roger looks familiar, and there's one other.
Is there Dan, would you mind calling on him, please?
Yeah, there's no hands up, but there are
okay.
two members of the public on the call.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So going once, going twice, no public comment. All right, we will proceed then to manager and staff reports. Whoever is going to lead us on that one.
Okay, we have quite a few reports today. We're going to start with Jean, and she has a quick report on credits.
All right, Washington Families Clean Energy Credits Program. We are looking at contracting here very soon with Commerce. Commerce received $150 million to assist low-income and moderate-income households with clean energy transition. And we have been allocated close to $800,000 for this program. Customers who will qualify are customers who have received assistance or a utility payment plan since January 1st of 2022. The qualifying income level is 80% of AMI. For our area, for a family of 4, that's $72,000 a year. And they only have to self-attest to that income. All have to be dispersed by mid-September. If we get close to that and we think we've out to everybody who qualifies at the 80th percentile, we can go up to 150% of AMI to give this money away. And for a family of 4, that's $135,000 a year. It is just a flat $200 credit that will be applied to the account. We're trying to make this as easy as possible to get the money out the door. Jameson is putting together a press release, which will go out in the next couple of weeks. We will have information on our website and a simple application for folks to fill out online.
Hey, Jean, just a quick question. Could you give a little background on this money, kind of what you know about the intent of it and why it's happening?
Sure.
because it's kind of odd, you know. I mean, it's unusual. So I think just so we know what's the driver.
The driver is clean energy transition. This is all part of the, I'm sorry. CETA. Thank you, CETA. It is to help, customers going through this clean energy. It's just what it is.
Okay, so this is basically from the carbon credit sales
Yes.
that the state has done, and this is a portion that's being distributed back to, I assume, private and public utilities in Washington state to our customers. And the intent is that folks use this money to help them get off fossil fuels and go electric. Is that a fair statement?
No, it's simply to help with their energy bills. It's just a flat $200 credit towards their energy bill. This is not anything to pay for transition to a more efficient energy source. It is just their low income outreach.
Okay. All right. Any comments or questions on that program by anybody? If not, please proceed.
Okay, Jose is gonna give a quick update on Eagle Ridge.
We are actively doing some flow testing. Bridge going back and forth with our engineering company. Pending results.
And Jose, I had a little hard time picking you up. So it sounds like you're doing flow testing now, and you're providing that to engineering to learn more about what the situation and issues are at Eagle Ridge.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of clarification on some of the things that they need.
Okay.
And yeah, we're just actively
And-
working.
Okay. And was staff able to meet? We had at the last meeting, we had some representatives from Eagle Ridge, the homeowners folks, and has staff been able to meet with them yet?
I've reached out to I forget her name, who's kind of their go-to communications person. We've gone back and forth on a few emails.
Okay, so you're still trying to get a date and time set up and what exactly they'd like to share and look at. Okay.
Do we have any idea of how long this evaluation period will take?
Very much longer. I would say a couple weeks, probably tops.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jose.
And is there a next set of steps, or is this the only thing?
So once we do the flow testing, so what we're doing is a hydraulic model for the Eagle Ridge side of things, right? So once we do that, it'll validate their model, and then they'll give us a recommendation, and we'll be able to get pressures and kind of an idea of what really is going on up there.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, our next presenter will be Will, and he'll give us a update on our broadband projects.
Yeah, we have some exciting progress. I think it'll pick me up okay. We have some exciting progress. We have fiber to the home to over 100 homes. They're not activated with service yet, but we are reaching more and more fiber drops. Our contractor, I think I reported this last time, is over 70% of mainline fiber in the Quilcene Ponds area. We've divided it between Quilcene Ponds and Gardner Ponds. We've moved into construction into Gardner for mainline. We have now hired 2 new network techs, our network tech lead and our network tech 2. We have a job offer to a network tech 1 starting in June. They will be installing the service to over 100 homes, and they'll continue on that path for the next few months. North Sky right now is just beginning the splicing for Pond B, which is East Quilcene. That will be our first area to fully complete, and then moving around kind of Quilcene Bay and up towards Gardner and Chimicum. So we're excited about that. We have, what the, can't think of anything right now. Go ahead, Kevin.
Are you done?
For the moment.
Okay. So
Were you going to talk about broadband too, Kevin, or moving on to another topic?
move on unless Will had more.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions or comments on the broadband update?
Yeah, I was curious of on the take rate, we know we have the 60% threshold. How is that working as far as equity to getting that 60% out to people? Are we on a pace that we anticipated, ahead of pace there? And how many customers have we actually signed up to this point?
We are now at, let's see, we have combined areas between the two grants for the in-betweens and the Olympic Fiber Corridor. I believe we're at 52 or 53% of 60 for the Olympic Fiber Corridor. And the signups are coming in rapidly right now as we move to more construction. So that's about 100 more registrations for no cost installation that we have left in the Olympic Fiber Corridor out of over 800. In the in-betweens grant area, we are over capacity. We're at 62% registration, and we are going to have to vet some of those. Some of them are to vacant land, so we'll take those off the list, and then we'll have to contact some of the later signups to let them know that they will have to pay a $750 construction copay, but we do offer 3-year terms on that, $21 a month.
Will, once you get the different techs up to speed and provided with tools and have your plan in place, do you have any sense like how many folks per week they can hook up, or is that something that makes any sense at this point?
Minimum of 100 a month, and it'll have to be more than that. We're also looking at, for the Gardner area, that we may have to bring a contract installation firm to be able to complete them all by the end of the year.
Okay.
We start out with our own team to make sure we can do it the way we want before we bring contractors.
And again, these particular grants, are they need to be fully executed by the end of the year? Is that our time frame?
That is our target.
Okay. Okay. Any other commissioners for the broadband report? Okay.
I believe we will.
I appreciate you keeping us up to speed, and even something as simple as this is really helpful, just to kind of keep us going. When when there's new news, a new hire, a monthly report on what's been accomplished, I think that's really helpful. Okay, Kevin.
I'm going to turn it over real quick to Melanie.
Yeah, I am happy to introduce Jeff Dodd. He is our new safety manager here at the PUD. So he's our first ever safety manager, which is a big milestone for us at the district. So not only are we excited about that, but we're also excited to have his knowledge and expertise on board. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, commissioners.
So, welcome, Jeff. So a little more clarity just for the public's knowledge in terms of safety. The initial thought for me is it's internal safety. Our crew is what we're doing. Is there a public safety component involved as well? Will Jeff be working out in the community, or is it strictly an in-house type of a safety plan or project that he'll be working?
At first, it will be internal facing, but we do think as time goes on, there will be some more public safety that's involved in his position. But the focus right now is internal employee safety.
Thank you.
Jeff, welcome. Can you tell us just a little bit of your background?
Yeah, the last 10 years I've been with Comcast Cable and working in Washington and Oregon, in charge of employee safety and health for those two regions. Prior to that, I was with the city of Everett for 17 years, city safety official, and moving back to Jefferson County as a Chimwacum graduate, and now relocating here for my next adventure.
Whatever.
Yeah, employment adventure.
Welcome, Jeff. Is a big part of your job also OSHA compliance?
Correct, yes. And in Washington, the WSHA, DOSH, and OSHA. So yes, all the safety, workplace safety and health.
Okay.
Working safely both internally, and then when we're out in the field, that impacts the customers as well. So making sure that we're working safely around traffic and right of ways and in customers' homes and.
And if we had let's say we had an incident where something happened, whether it's with our guys or also with a contractor or something like that, would you go out and conduct an investigation of what happened?
I think that would be the expectation, that I'd like to be on site or at least immediately on the phone, coaching and advising and coordinating with our internal leadership team.
Okay. Well, great. Welcome aboard and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, Kevin, please continue.
So we'll wrap this up fairly quickly. My schedule, the rest of this week, I will be remote. I'm trying to group a bunch of meetings together so that I can have some downtime and some work time. So while I'm gone, Joy will be in charge. We will have, like I said, most of my meetings I'll do via the Zoom. I will take care of what I have to. Other than that, that's the end of managers and staff report.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, then we have commissioner reports next, unless, did the commissioners have any more questions for Kevin or staff?
No.
Hearing none.
I have a general question. Do we have any special meeting in the works that we're thinking about, just scheduling purposes that maybe we're not aware of yet? We got any kind of dates or specific topics that we're looking at coming up?
We have several topics that we know are going to be mixed in through either the 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock meeting or 4 to 5. For example, if you remember, we had to cancel the audit update. So that will be coming back probably in either 2 weeks. We have to schedule that. We have a housing group that we put on the schedule, I think, for the 18th. So we have quite a few things. How about if I have Annette send out kind of a little primer to things we know that are coming up in the near future?
Because I did have one thing I wanted to bring up, and that was, I know we had a retreat, I think it's a couple years ago now, I forget how long it's been. And I know that we're periodically supposed to look at, our strategic plan, our risk management, financial plan. Is there a chance that we can get some sort of a retreat scheduled, for multiple topics, things that are the business that we're supposed to keep up with and keep ahead of, particularly, is there updates needed particularly, right? Different policies we have or different initiatives that we're involved with or things like that. Is there a way we can maybe get some consensus out of the board as to things we'd like to address, from governance policies to different things like that we might want to address rather than doing it in regular business meetings?
We had talked just a pinch earlier, maybe the July timeframe, kind of depending on everyone's travel schedules and how it work out, but we could look at a time frame along those lines.
Yeah, I just wanted to put it on my fellow commissioners' radars if that's something that, they feel we need to do. I think we're a little bit overdue on looking at some of those, reviewing some of those policies.
I guess the only concern I have is that it seems like we have a lot going on right now that we keep focused on, keeping the budget process moving smoothly, keeping these time sensitive construction projects like the broadband and other things moving ahead. And I think there's an opportunity for us to gather up past information on, strategic planning and what we thought the organization was going to look like at this point, and update that with the budget process. And we've talked a little bit about that. So I'm totally open to looking at some of those items that Dan is bringing up, so long as it's the most important, thing that we should be doing. If we've got some downtime and we can review it, because it has been a while, I think it is good to touch base on what we've done and have we implemented those things, and are we set, or are things out of date and needing updating?
Well, with everything we got going on, as you alluded to, I think looking at the organizational structure and what that looks like now and where we're headed with it in a very steep trajectory, that's another component I think I'd like to see integrated into a retreat, is the organizational structure. because we're getting into budget and things like that, we need to kind of know where the money's going to go and what are the priorities for different projects, along with the policies, whether or not they're going to have to be adjusted.
Yeah, it does feel like we're kind of entering a new stage at this point when we've talked about the amount of capital improvement projects that we think we might need as we're getting these studies done on the electrical system. We've got new water mandates. It feels like we're evolving a little bit as a utility, going 70 employees, looking at having 100 in the not too distant future. So I think it is important to make sure that the commission understands where we're going, how we're going to make it all work, what all the parts do, how they work together. So I don't disagree.
So I don't have a problem with convening for that purpose. I think late July, early August would be a good time, but it really depends on staff availability. As Commissioner Randall pointed out, and as we're well aware of, there are a lot of things happening simultaneously. And so I want to be sensitive to the fact that staff time is precious.
Yeah, I just want to put it out there and get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and I think that, one way to look at it is, while all these big things are happening and we're adopting another budget, is making sure that we've got kind of informed consent by the commission on where we're going, that we really understand where we're going. We understand what the drivers are. If there's going to be significant expenditures soon or down the road, we understand what's driving that. We have some conversations about how we think we're going to pay for it, and understanding, again, with these pretty significant additions to the organization, that we feel comfortable with everything. So, okay. Commissioner Tupper, would you be willing to go first on reports?
I can do that. So on May 8th, I attended the NOAANET meeting, which was held at Pend Oreille PUD this month. NOAANET had 70 days of liquidity for last month, and revenue up slightly over budget estimates, and the expenses are on track with budget. The member loan replacement installments that went towards paying off the current, or the liability that they carried on the pension that we all put money into, those repayment installments went out with interest, and the members are actually receiving a little bit higher interest rate than what was proposed and planned on. So that was a bonus, but we basically got paid in full. Our 50,000, the balance of that was paid completely by NOAANET. So thank you to NOAANET for that. And so all our money that we put out for that is back in our coffers. NOAANET is also interviewing for 2 positions in their NOC, one position for their field engineering crew. They're also working on a project to potentially expand its 911 service and 911 management to operate in locations outside of Washington State. So they're looking at expanding that business line and that service out beyond the existing parameters of being within Washington. So that was kind of interesting that project that they're working on there. They're also working on a pilot/trial project with a PUD in Eastern Washington, where NOAANET would provide some service to them as an RSP in that market. NOAANET's challenges are the marketing and promoting the NOAANET brand, some of the early steps that they're looking at to determine if NOAANET can be competitive and accepted and within that market and being viable within that market. They're also looking at a September timeline to determine whether or not it really is going to be viable, the business plan they're going to put in place there. So something to keep our eyes on there, them getting into the retail side of things. The executive committee voted and gave CEO Craig Nelson a 7.5% salary increase. Per his contract, the CEO gets a minimum of a 5% increase, and that's a yearly contract, on 5% on the base. So it was a little more than that. Everyone was in agreement that Craig's doing a good job of organization and leaning out the organization and moving it forward in different ways. So that was a very positive discussion on that. I met with Kevin Street on May 10th. I received a phone call on May 13th from a customer in the Quilcene Fiber Project area who voiced concerns about the quality of work that was being performed by some of our contractors in that area on roadways and driveways, getting restored to more of a what they considered a normal condition. And I relayed those concerns to the GM. Later on the 13th, I attended our special meeting on the purchase of the 193 auto property. On May 14th, I participated in the Growth Management Steering Committee meeting at the Quilcene Community Center. County staff, and there'll be some information and presentation on this at the ICG meeting this Thursday. But the county staff and their consultant presented a draft for a revised countywide planning policies plan. And that update was addressing legislative directives that were coming out of Olympia towards, growth management related issues, the needs of the county. The committee asked a lot of questions and commented on the topics that were within that draft. And they ranged from, the topics were anything from housing development, low income housing in particular, to economic development impacts on transit and transportation, UGA designations, and some zoning and siting implications. It was a pretty long conversation about a lot of different topics, but they're all important to how the county is going to move forward with, and the city as well, with some of their comprehensive plans.
Hey, Dan, on the growth management policies, I remember at the first meeting there was a lot of talk about the growth projections. Did the committee? What's that?
Went with the median.
With the median.
40,000.
Okay.
I think it was 40,000, maybe 40 or 42. I don't remember the exact amount. But it was the median number.
Okay, thank you.
And that's by when, Dan?
2042, I want to say. It's like 20, I don't know if it coincides just after the censuses, I believe. So, and it's about a 20-year cycle, I think. So I think it was through 2042 off the top of my head. I get that confused with our payoff date on our US loans sometimes. Like, hard to keep it all separate in my head sometimes. But it's about a 20-year plan projection. It might have been 2045 even. I don't remember now. Public comment on the draft can be made by going to the Department of Community Development or the county website if you want to comment on the draft and the proposals that are in that. There were a couple people from the public there that voiced a little bit of concerns about some of the way that housing would be addressed in particular. The next meeting of the GMSC will be on June 11th, likely at the Tri-Area Community Center, but that was yet to be determined at the last meeting where it would be, but it will be on the 11th of June, pending any changes to the county and the city schedules. It's also possible that countywide planning policy draft could be adopted at that meeting. So if anyone's really concerned or wants to follow that meeting could potentially have some action taken at it, depending on what public comments or committee feedback comes in the interim. And they may have to tweak some more things, and it could happen after that next meeting. Attended the Puget Sound to Pacific Trail Coalition meeting on May 15th. The coalition is inking the final documents on a $16 million in grants that they have for trail planning, and it must be spent by 2032. Ryan Helzer, the forest manager for Jefferson Land Trust, and he's fairly new to that position, talked about plans for the Chimacum Ridge Community Forest Land that the Land Trust gained complete ownership of in December of 2023. Commissioner Heidi Eisenhower spoke, and members from the Port Townsend Trail Coalition and the North Kitsap Trails Coalition spoke about this trail. It starts on the East Coast and comes clear out to La Push, Washington. It takes in some of the Olympic Discovery Trail, but they're trying to fill the piece in between basically Edmonds and Squim, for lack of better guidelines or geography. That's kind of the real major part that they're trying to work on right now here in this area. And what else? That Trail Coalition will meet regularly on the second Thursday of each month from 9 to 11, and that might be at Finn River. I don't know if that's going to change locations or if it will be consistently at Finn River. I participated with Commissioner Randall, Jameson Hahn, and Savannah Hoffman from our line crew in the roadie parade on May 18th. Thank you to Dawn Street, the general manager's wife, for supplying fresh rhododendrons to decorate our vehicles and her expertise in decorating. So I don't know if we won any awards, but we looked good. So, right. I met with Assistant General Manager Joy Lichty yesterday on May 20th, and earlier today I met with GM Kevin Street. I'm going to attend the Waputa Strategic Planning meeting on May 22nd. I will attend the ICG meeting on May 23rd, and I will attend the Jefferson County Fire Chiefs meeting on June 3rd. And that completes my report.
Thank you, Dan. Ken, you want to go?
Sure. So on the 9th, I met with Don McDaniel, our long-term consultant. On the 10th, had a meeting with our general manager, attended the special board meeting on the Otto Street building on the 13th. Another meeting with our general manager on the 15th. And also on the 17th, we talked. I will not be attending the ICG meeting. I am in the process of moving from one house to another. Still-
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a prolonged and anxiety-filled process, enough said. So I'm taking a couple of days this week and taking advantage of the long weekend to get our belongings from one place to another. So on the 31st, I'll have another meeting with the general manager. Upcoming after the next board meeting, I've got a couple of board meetings with PERMs. And that's my report.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Hey, before I give my report, Kevin, I realized I forgot to ask you something as part of staff, and this relates to that concrete batch plant environmental review process that was going on in the Gardner area. Has there been any updates or additional communications that you're aware of with the county on that project?
No, Jeff, I'm not aware of if there's been a change since the last time we've talked to the county. I will reach out again to them tomorrow and see if they can tell me exactly where they are.
Okay, because I remember that it seemed like the outstanding question was exactly how much water was the applicant going to be using at this batch plant, and where would it be coming from? Because they seemed like they were saying up to, but not exceeding 4,000 gallons per day, and it could come from their own well, it could come from our water. They weren't being specific, and there was one public comment that kind of put into question that number was accurate, that it could be a lot higher than that based on what their understanding of how much water it takes to make concrete.
I do know when I talked to them prior that the 4,000 gallons was, they were okay with that number. Whether it's the local well that's on the existing property or ours, it's the same aquifer regardless of, who's pulling it from where.
Okay, and do we know if the county has issued a SEPA determination? I mean, they issued their preliminary intent to do a SEPA, but are you aware if they've issued anything since then?
No, I have been told they are going to issue it though.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So on May 8th, I had a meeting with Don McDaniel. On May 9th with Kevin Street, the general manager. On the 13th with Joel Paisner, our attorney, and attended the special meeting that the PUD board had. On the 14th, had another meeting with the general manager. On the 15th, met with Casey Gribble, who's a Jefferson County resident, who is working for a company that makes kind of video monitoring equipment that can also monitor specifically how parts of our electrical system are performing, including substations and other equipment. And apparently they do it through infrared and whatever other sensors they use, where they can literally tell if there's a problem developing with our equipment. And I tried to find out who on staff would be the appropriate people to talk to about the opportunity for them to talk to our staff about the equipment. On the 17th, had a really interesting conversation with Ray Wiseman, who is the general manager of Yakima Power, which is the company that's wholly owned by the Yakima tribe in Eastern Washington. And the basis for that phone call was we all attend meetings where they've talked about the 6-party agreement, or the 6-sovereign agreement, as the tribes call it, regarding the Columbia River and past lawsuits and stopping those lawsuits. And I've heard definitely the kind of the public power perception of that agreement, but what I hadn't heard is what is the tribal perception of that agreement, and found somebody who knew Ray and got an introduction. And we talked less about that than really about what the Yakima tribe is doing. And Kevin may know this, but they're following in our footsteps. They are taking over Pacific Power's service area within the Yakima Nation reservation. And I don't have my notes right here, but they have, they've got fewer customers than we do, but it's a pretty sizable area with significant loads, including significant irrigation loads. And they haven't taken over the towns yet, but they're taking over everything outside of that. And then when the federal funding passed for significant money for infrastructure in the U.S., with tribes get special bonuses, they've applied for $1.7 billion in funding from the federal government, and have been successful so far on 7 of 8 of their applications. And one example of things they're doing is, I used to work in Yakima County, there's significant large open irrigation canals that pass through the county and return water to the Yakima River. And they're kind of dangerous, and cars fall in, kids playing in them drown. They've had all sorts of issues with them. They lose water over time through evaporation. They're old. Some of them are probably close to 100 years old. They develop cracks and leak water. They've either begun or done piping of all these canals on the Yakima Reservation. And another big issue they've had is a lot of the renewable energy projects that are proposed in the state of Washington are all occurring on Yakima, either tribal lands or ceded lands outside the reservation. And the tribe has significant concerns about cultural impacts and other impacts of these projects. And they've been kind of in a contentious relationship with the state on these things. But one of the things they're trying to point out is there's lots of areas where the tribe has zero problems with renewable energy projects. And one of the areas is these piped canals. So they have plans to, can't remember if it was 150 megawatts. It was a really large solar installation that they're now going to be building over the footprint of these canals, because the canals go east and west, which gives them a good southern exposure. And they have a large energy storage project planned, kind of like the Energy Northwest plan, of running equipment, like either a train. I think they're talking about these large gravel trucks, these huge ones full of rocks that would go up a hill and then down a hill. But anyway, the Yakima tribe is doing some really cool stuff, and they're following in our footsteps. So I'm hoping to learn more and meet with him in person the next time I pass through his area. But he was very complimentary of us, knew a lot about our history, and I think they're going to do some really cool things that we can, hopefully, public power can learn from. Oh, and then another interesting point was, to do this power, they needed a significant new interconnection with BPA, and BPA took a long time, but gave them a quote of like $150 million or $140 million to make the improvements to allow this interconnection. And the Yakima tribe just said, heck with that, we'll do it ourselves. And they're basically planning to build the infrastructure to interconnect with BPA's system on their own. So huge stuff going on in their area. I don't know if anybody had any questions on that. If not, go ahead, Dan.
Do an inline hydro like we're proposing. You're talking about the open canal. I think like Turlock Irrigation District in California has the solar panels on their open ditches. What exactly are they looking at with the piping? You lost me on that.
Yeah, it took me a while to understand it too. So the piping, just imagine they went from open canals to now buried pipes. So the water is underground, covered up. That the footprint of that canal is if you think of like our transmission corridor through Jefferson County where our high voltage power, if that was all underground, they're looking at the land above it as being available for putting solar panels. And the reason they would put them there is they know that there's not going to be any culturally significant tribal concerns about those canals because they've been there for over 100 years. And if you know they're worried about renewable energy projects disturbing, or like that pumped hydro project that was proposed off the Columbia River was going to flood a valley that apparently they had a lot of concerns about, and they blocked it basically. That these canals are disturbed areas and they have no concerns about impacts to cultural sites. So does that make sense?
Yeah,
But
thanks.
they literally, it'd
yeah,
be
that-
like it'd be a ground mounted solar array. You see them in farm fields and all over the place, but just a conventional ground mounted solar array, but over a very large area. And then the other thing that was wild too was and he sent me a presentation he did to his board just so I could understand a little bit more about what they're doing. They had all these pictures of cars impacting power poles on tribal property, with one after another of one truck or somebody using farm equipment, farming at a field, hitting a guy wire, just one pole after another down all over the place, and then the different outages that could cause or different fires it could cause. So just different issues in their area, which was interesting. Let's see here. So moving on, I was at the Roadie Parade, as Dan said, and in addition to what he said, which I totally agree with, and it was really exciting to meet Savannah, our newest line person, and I think our first female in that crew, which is exciting, and a Jefferson County grad, and told a little bit of her journey to get there, she got a CDL from, I think, Peninsula College, and then she went to line school. And these were all things that it turns out she needed to work with the line crew. So I hope that we can continue to feed that information back to high school students here of what it takes, that she was a graduate in 2022. In 2024, she's working for us. So it can be that fast, but you have to do the right things. There was lots of thumbs up during the Roadie Parade, lots of thank yous. People were hollering out one very specific one. Thank you for hooking up my Power Thursday. So there was lots of folks giving us kudos and being appreciative of their power system. It's theirs. And quite a fair number of, hey, can you lower my bill? People hollering that out. So I wanted to put Gene on the spot real quick and just ask, so when we get customers that are upset with their power bill, just assuming that everything's correct, the meter's correct, they actually use the power, we billed them properly, what are the CSRs currently instructed to do in terms of walking customers through, okay, you're not happy with your bill, let's take a look at that. Let's look at your power consumption. Do they talk to them about how it compares to the average customer? Do they ask them questions about the kind of appliances they have? Do they offer information on energy efficiency rebates? And I know we don't quite have that RESP loan program up and running yet, but could you just share with me or us what the CSRs are instructed to kind of cover?
Well, you covered most of it except for the part where we tell them to call Jeff Randall. No, honestly, we go through the size of their house. We ask them to talk about that. What kind of heat do they use? We just get an idea of what their lifestyle is. We give them hints and tips for seeing what's using most of the power. We do direct them to rebates, weatherization. We have a DIY energy audit kit. It's a PDF that we send them. It's hard for older folks or people with limited mobility to go through that. But we still talk them through.
Okay. And that was mainly my question, just to kind of see how we turn that back around and try and engage in a conversation with them and try, because I think most people have I got this sense when I was working for the solar company. If you ask most people, how many kilowatt hours of power do you use in a year? How many average kilowatt hours do you use a day? Most people have no clue. They can tell you roughly what they pay a month on their power bill or high and lows, but that's about it. And I'm glad that we're trying to engage them in terms of how much power they use so that they can then think about how they're using it. Because for me, it's kind of like going to the grocery store. If you don't like your grocery bill, okay, look at what are you buying, and are there ways to try and get that more under control where you're happy with it.
We come at it from a perspective of gaining trust and trying to form a partnership with our customer. We use education as our largest tool. It really is our strongest tool in the box, is education.
Okay, thank you for that, Gene. And then today, I just want to extend a big thank you to Chris Lott. He's probably not on the line, but I'm at a hotel in BC and I was completely blocked from accessing my email, and Chris quickly got me squared away on my timesheet. I also couldn't get it to work. So our security is awesome, but it prevented me from doing that. So thank you, Chris, for helping. And then looking ahead, about the only thing I have on my agenda coming up is the ICG meeting Thursday. I will be there, and we are the host, so I will be chairing. And then I also have a NODC meeting earlier that day, and we're going to be talking about, I think, affordable housing at that one too. Okay, that is all I have. So back to, give me a second while I get our agenda back here. Ah, heck.
Consent agenda is next.
Perfect. Thank you, Ken. So are there any changes to the consent agenda? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. The consent agenda is approved. Next one is old business capacity fee charges. Joy, are you going to be leading us on that one?
I'll kick that off. Yeah, so last time brought forward staff recommendation for implementing a capacity charge for electric and water. And it was, and then commissioners had some questions and wanted us to go back and bring back some more information, specifically what this charge looked like for, you know, the full range of customers, not just the residential example that I had presented. Well, that's what we've done, and thanks, Will is sharing the first of our more detailed example. And so Jimmy, I want to thank our engineering manager, Jimmy Scarborough, for helping me put together these numbers. And so what we're looking at here first is just that simple example that I had shared last time, a little more detail here. New residential service with simple 200 amp service from an existing transformer. So that's what these are, just sample, charges for discussion only. Don't want to make sure that customers aren't thinking this is what's being implemented. This is just for discussion, illustrative purposes. So let us know if you have any questions on this one. That's pretty straightforward.
Joy, there was a question for you to use the microphone, if you don't mind.
Great. Just that I'm good. Okay, good. All right. Any questions from commissioners on that one? Okay, if you could just scroll up. And then the next one, again, residential, but this is service requiring a primary line extension of 100 feet with a new transformer. So as you can see, that jumps up and subtotaled there for your for illustrative purposes.
So again, Joy, like with that one, you could just take subtract the $4,300 from that one, and that's what that customer would pay now.
That's my understanding. I'm looking at
Yeah,
you.
Subtotal.
around 11,600.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And if you can move it down, we'll go to the small commercial example. So this would be 3-phase, 400 amp service with a 100-foot primary line extension and a new transformer, which those transformers have gotten very expensive. I'm sure you know that. I don't know if you can scroll up just a little bit there. Yeah.
So again, on that one, so we had a residential one of 4,300. So on that one, so when you say the panel, so 3-phase, is that just if you have 3-phase, that's a basic panel when it says 400 amps, or is that like 200 amp panels? Or
One 400 amp service, so that's the main service rating.
okay,
Probably one of our smaller 3-phase services, but it's used quite a bit.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great if you could just keep going. And then this example here would be the large commercial, which is typical service. This one here for an EV fast charger, which I believe was a specific question last time. And if you could scroll just a little bit.
And Jimmy, would that be basically like the one that's going in down next to the Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, this is modeled exactly after that service. There's some EV chargers, they're gonna be more than 1,200 amps. There's gonna be some that are less than 1,200 amps. So 1,200 amps is kind of in the middle.
And again, the fee down there, that's assuming what we'd be charging now minus the 89,000. So they'd be paying roughly, you've got it there, 60 some thousand. Okay.
Range if it's got 100-foot. And these will vary depending on, the complexity of the project. They're fairly simple line extensions, so.
Right.
And these are fairly large amounts. What's the life expectancy of the infrastructure? Just for curiosity's sake here, you have an estimate as to over how long a business would be able to amortize this out or depreciate it out or whatever terms you want to use.
Yeah, so talking to our infrastructure, the transformer, your goal is to get hopefully 50 years out of it. The cable, depending on all kinds of things, environmental, whatever, it's between 35 and 50 years for the cable. The customer's infrastructure, I'm not sure. It all depends on, what year, quality.
Yeah, I just want to put it into perspective. This is a business type of a scenario here that this is part of doing business. They're putting something onto our load, onto our infrastructure, our networks, or not networks, our grid. So again, we have to look at the long term of this cost as would that this is, it looks like a lot, but in the big scheme over time, we're not asking them to, spend more than their share. That's kind of the way I'm looking at this.
Well, I'll just since you threw on that one, Dan, it is a lot, 89 grand. It's more than doubling the cost that they're paying the PUD in this scenario. And I realize different scenarios are going to be different. I think, we've got to go, the way I'm looking at it is we've got a goal with this capacity charge. We're trying to raise money to help pay for needed infrastructure that we need to have so that we have a reliable system in ways that are different from our current tools, which is rates and borrowing money. And borrowing money is just future rates. And we have other goals. And one of those goals is we're trying to decarbonize. And I'm concerned that this could be a really significant hit on these fast chargers that we're not going to have very many of, but could really make it difficult for organizations that are trying to finance and put these things in to make that possible. So I think we've got two public goals in this case kind of competing with each other and making it harder for the decarbonized goal to occur.
But the incentives and the subsidies are out there for those types of adventures or those types of endeavors. Again, we're looking at what is the cost to our ratepayers to extend or expand our grid. And we got to deal in real numbers. If it's expensive, it's expensive. And that has to be borne by the people that are driving that growth. You know, we don't want to just keep subsidizing everything through the same customer base all the time. I think that's unsustainable for a lot of people, a lot of customers in this county, for us to keep operating with that mindset that it's just going to be subsidized by everybody. There's a lot of people who are right on the cusp now that, you know, that don't qualify for low income, don't have a business to change their income structure. So we have to be mindful of that.
I would just like to hear from some of the folks who are considering putting in fast vehicle charging projects as to how this would impact their project financing. So I'm going to turn that one back to staff to get additional information.
Joy,
Sounds good.
going back to the residential scenario, the capacity charge that's listed here, how does that compare with what FCS identified as the maximum?
It's, so the cost of the capacity there, that $89.60, that's up in the capacity chart.
Yes.
Yeah, that's 80% of the maximum defensible amount. And so that's sort of something we came forward with as a recommendation, but that is all for discussion here.
At the 112 that was also in the report, instead of being 4,300, it'd be almost 5,400.
Well, I skipped ahead to the last page and I noticed that our proposal for a 200 amp circuit would be 2 to 3 times more than what our neighboring utilities are charging. So, you know, I'm certainly open to our having a capacity charge, but I have a bit broader concern that is somewhat similar to Commissioner Randall's, that we don't want to have certain unintended consequences as a result, because we do need housing. And I would not want to see that retarded. The cost of it is freighted to too great a degree with the cost of putting in service. The same thing applies to business expansion and also to the, and I think probably the solution is to create a separate category in terms of fast charging stations, because again, if we're going to contribute to the reduction of CO2 in the atmosphere, that has to be available to people and at a reasonable cost.
So on the last page here, I'm always concerned when we start to compare ourselves to neighbors or even like-sized utilities, because we've been in the electric business 11 years and we have a lot of debt. Our asset to debt ratio is not what theirs are. The number of customers matters, the type of infrastructure. You know, we really do need to look at this through the prism of Jefferson PUD. What Clallam or Mason or Kitsap or PSE or anybody else does is irrelevant to me. We have the cost, we have staff we pay, we have trucks we roll, we have our bills that we have to pay, and there's only so much subsidization we can do. It could be painful, and there may be some adverse impacts to business or, you know, other entities, but we've got to balance it in a way that we have to recover our cost. If we're going to expand the grid and there's entities, businesses, or residents that are doing that, they're going to have to bear, in my opinion, a little more, or maybe a lot more, I don't know, of that responsibility. I just don't see any other way around it.
I have a different question on this page, and this might be a Jimmy question. So, Jimmy, when you look at the per amp for Clallam under residential versus commercial, they've got 490 under residential per amp and 817 per amp on commercial. Are you assuming that they're doing what we do, which is there's a standard number and it's just that as the voltage goes up for commercial, the per amp cost then goes up, but they're applying the same formula? Or are they charging commercial more than residential with a different formula?
I'm assuming they're charging commercial different than residential with a different formula. And that could be, 200 amp service at your house versus 200 amp service at a commercial, that you're going to have realistically more load at a commercial site than you will at a residential site.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess looking at these different tables, like if you drop down to 3-phase, when you run the numbers, it goes from 21 to 32, and we're using the same formula, whereas that's not twice as much, and theirs goes up more than twice as much. Anyway, well, that's interesting that it looks like they're choosing to charge their commercial customers more, and they may have their reasons for doing that. Well, should we go back to where Joy left off and let her continue on? Is that okay with the commissioners?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Actually, jumped to the last, bit of information that we had to share. So we were hoping this was enough to kick off a robust discussion amongst the commissioners. It's already began. And so, any other questions you have for us? So this is what we have for today. There was a couple of questions that Joel was going to be speaking to. And I did try to connect with him before he went on vacation, but it just didn't work out. So I think we're on hold until
Okay, so I guess I'll ask the question then. So these are programs that Clallam and Mason currently have in effect? Or are they
Yeah.
considering adopting them?
No, these are in effect. Yes.
Okay, do we know how long they've had them? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know the exact length. I do know it's been a while.
Okay.
The managers meetings for the Waputa group.
Okay, and so within Waputa, these are the only other ones we could find then?
I wouldn't say that.
Oh.
It is, I don't know, Jimmy, do you want to take a stab at describing how difficult?
Well,
it
some
is?
PUDs don't even need to do it because they generate a lot of revenue and they generate energy, and others are water only. So the number of PUDs that we match up with is kind of small to start with.
It is. There are some others, but it was pretty difficult to decipher how to stack them up against these. These were the easier ones. Jimmy, do you want to?
Yeah, so we look at some other PUDs, some of it was a blended cost with their capacity and the new service charge. So they had the new service hookup fees blended in with the capacity charge. So it was hard to, pick out what portion of that would be the capacity fee.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, we've been in the power business 11 years. We took on $115 million in debt. A lot of these utilities have been around 60, 70, 80 years. They've updated their infrastructure. They're on maintenance type programs. They're way ahead of the curve from where we are. It's like to try and compare us to them is kind of apples and oranges to me. I'm not discounting it, but I really do think we just need to focus on Jefferson PUD. What are our needs? What are our expenses? What are our revenues? And what do we need to do to pay the bills at a minimum margin? That is what we need to be looking at and the approach we need to take with this. if there's any doubt, I am for a capacity fee charge.
And then I didn't see, so how was this list? So it sounds like Commissioner Collins had seen it. Where is this been submitted to us, sent out to us?
No, it was handed out this.
Okay. Okay. So Joy, if you could email, or Jimmy or whoever's got it, email this out, I'd appreciate that. Well, my feeling on this is, it's significant, what we're talking about. This is more significant than a rate increase that we would be considering in terms of, and it will have less of an impact because it's not going to impact everybody. It's going to impact new service. But in terms of money per customer, it's going to be a bigger impact than what our rate increases are per customer. And I feel like it's going to take us a little while to chew through this. And I may follow up with Jimmy just to kind of get a better sense of, and I realize customer information is confidential, but even if we could have like numbers, how many commercial projects do we get a year that fall into those categories? I mean, that would actually be super helpful. It would just give us a sense for the impact and how likely these projects are in the last 5 years or something. We get X number of 200 amps services, we get X number. I don't know if those numbers are readily available or not, but that would be helpful. And then I've expressed my concerns about the, decarbonizing goals, of not hurting our county's decarbonizing goals by what we're doing. Another concern is when we looked at rates, we had FCS recommending significantly increasing residential rates and actually lowering commercial rates. And we reviewed the whole thing and in our wisdom concluded that the commercial customers weren't complaining about rates. So I think we did a smaller rate increase on them, but and that allowed us to reduce the proposed rate increase on residential, because our residential customers really struggle with other impacts in our county, which are unique, such as this extremely high cost of housing here compared to what you can make. And I think we should be looking at that as we adopt this. I think a lot of the driver of impacts to our system in terms of capacity is residential. It seems like where commercial goes is more in the core areas of where our infrastructure is, and residential occurs all over the place. Like we had that large development occurring out in the north side of Port Townsend where we had very little service. So it just seems to me like a lot of our improvements are going to be driven by residential customers more. And one of the things we're seeing with that purchase in Auto Street is that commercial properties, they don't go for the same price. They're having they have a hard time selling them. And I think while our commercial customers, I haven't been hearing them complaining about our electrical rates as being too high. At the same time, I think they struggle. I think it's harder in a lot of ways to do business and be successful as a business in Jefferson County than it is in other more urban counties. So I'm just cognizant that new businesses have lots of economic benefits for our county. And like the decarbonizing goals, I don't want us to adopt capacity charges that impact with our economic development goals.
So I'm in the same page with you on that, Jeff. I want businesses to thrive and be able to do business here. But up against residential, the residential customers don't have the ability to set their own, fees or charges for goods and services. So the business has more margin, more leeway, more ways to recover, maybe better options for getting financing, that sort of thing. So I think at the end of the day, business can take care of business. It is the residential that concerns me. And if we don't adopt things like this, it's absolutely, our rates are going to become intolerable for a lot of residents. So if we do this, that will soften, in my opinion, overall, not that we're subsidizing one over with the other, but it will help on the rate increases they're likely coming in a cost of service, rate study. So that's my goal here, is to try and focus on the residential a little more, because I think we're really close to pushing people beyond their ability to pay their bills. And we have to do this work, the work that's coming, the work that's needed, whether it's a residential area that's pushing it or whether it's a business that's pushing it. We have to adopt something here to soften that, or the rates for everyone are going to become intolerable.
And I don't disagree. I think we need some sort of capacity charge, because I think we do need we have such significant investments in our electrical infrastructure. Because one thing that everybody would agree is intolerable is if our system becomes unreliable at certain times of year because we have not made the investments we need to make. So I think the public would agree with that. So then the question is, okay, at what level do we set this new revenue tool, and how do we apply it to the different categories? So I had one request that staff reach out to people who are developing the EV charging fast chargers to find out how this would impact their project financing. And then Jimmy or whoever can respond to this, is it possible we could put numbers in these categories for how many we've been getting, the last year, the last couple of years? Is that information we have accessible, so we can see how many of these in these different groupings we would get?
Yeah, we can put it together. It'll take a little bit of time. It's not readily available, but it should go fairly quick.
Okay, and I would encourage you just to build it right into this table.
Little rough
Just
estimate. How many-
yeah, just to the left, Jefferson County number of project, and it can be estimated. Just tell us how you're getting the data, but last year before, just add some columns to the left, and that would be helpful for me. Commissioners, do you have any other questions on this?
I would like to just talk a little bit about the philosophy behind this. Is new customers coming up to par what everyone else has in the system. So the numbers can be whatever we want them to be, but the goal is to make everyone equal. And if we don't do something with new customers moving in, the amount of infrastructure we need, the rates will reflect that to all customers. So that's why a capacity fee is even discussed, is trying to say, okay, you've lived here forever. You've paid for the infrastructure to be here. Somebody new comes in, and I don't care if they put the house right next to a substation or the very end of the line. It puts the same burden under peak loads to everybody. So, the numbers we can tweak and work on, but there is a fairness built into a charge like this. It does make new businesses, new homeowners pay their share to come into the community.
Yeah, and I don't think, Kevin, the commission is saying we shouldn't do this in some fashion or form. It's just the right fit and the right size to begin the program. Commissioners have any other comments or questions? And I don't know, I don't see hands, or if there's folks. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
To be a little bit more specific, I'd be comfortable going with about 50% of what FCS identified as the maximum. More than that, I think, as I said earlier, I'm concerned about consequences to the community that would have an adverse impact. And I can't see making the cost of housing really high. It's already very high. And adding to that, I think, is contrary to the goals that we have.
And I think, Ken, I don't disagree with you. And one of the things when something like this gets adopted, those fees usually don't go down over time. You know, people kind of expect them to go up over time. Capacity charges or system development charges or whatever jurisdictions that have them, they slowly go up over time. So I think whatever rate we set, we should be cognizant of that. It will increase over time. But I'd like to be a little more cautious too. And I think if we can get those numbers from Jimmy, we could do some rough estimates of, okay, how much money do we think this will generate per year? And I think that would be helpful for the commission.
Yeah, but again, I don't disagree with what you're saying. But we don't want to start out too low and then first year raise it, second year raise it. We need to kind of come in where we're factoring in maybe the first 3 years of melding what we think that'll be into a front end window, so that we don't have to necessarily change it. Maybe it's less the first year, more the third year, balance it out, that way of looking at it rather than just trying to do it year by year or a 10-year outlook on it, because we don't know what inflation's going to do, the cost of materials, that sort of thing. So I'm cautious of starting too low. We have to recover cost for what we know is going to be added to the grid. I think that is ultimately, if that's 50%, that's great. If it's 60, that's what it is. If it's 100% of what FCS gave us, then that's what it should be. That's kind of my approach. It has to be what it takes for us to expand, upgrade the grid, and pay our bills. It's just that simple. We're not for profit, but we can't lose money, right? We just can't.
Well, I will disagree with you on one thing, Dan, and that is that we don't have to just take what staff says and stamp it. That's why we're here. We're elected to use our discretion and determine what is the appropriate fit for the customers and owners of our system who ultimately end up paying for this stuff. So that's why we're here. I just want to pause this for a second on this discussion. Is there anybody on the phone that or has any questions or comments, or in the room? And if anybody there can see and can help
Roger.
me out.
It's
Okay.
Roger, I believe.
So Roger, if you have questions or comments, you have 3 minutes. Once you start talking, I'll start your timer.
Are you muted, Roger?
Can't hear you yet.
How's that?
You're on.
Oh, thank you. Okay. This is the old question of using fixed charges to pay for fixed costs. About, I don't know, 8 years ago, they tried it with demand fees. In case you have a big motor in your basement, we got demand fees. This is the same thing. It's just being calculated from the supply side. That's all. In case you have a big motor in your basement, that's the way it looks like to me. Demand charges are supply capacity charges are just demand charges figured from the supply side. And when you figure it from the supply side, you cut out your conservation, of course. And with this fee, you're not just getting out in front of your supply, you're getting out your electrical supply. You're getting out in front of your housing supply. And that's a problem because it affects everybody. It affects the PUD. The PUD has problems hiring people because they don't have the housing to put them in. They don't have the campgrounds for their contractors. It seems like we're going in the wrong direction on this because it just makes housing less affordable. And I don't think the discount's a good deal because it's like the bait and switch. Here's how much it costs, but we're going to give you a big break. It just doesn't sound right to me, and it sounds like you're paying for stuff that's already been paid for. The president, a couple of months ago, about the same time this capacity fee came up, the president came out against junk fees. And he wasn't just talking about banks. He wasn't just talking about airlines. Utilities are one of the largest drivers of inflation. And this is just more inflation, only we're adding it onto the cost of housing instead of the cost of electricity. And we already have a junk fee. We've got the fee that we pay $28 for every month. And and we don't need to be paying any more. The WUTC, which does a really good job, I think, of regulating rates, their dockets are pretty comprehensive. Over and over again, they go against ideas of decoupling, of removing of taking your revenue from fees instead of your rates, and that's what we got here. And that's a misconception that I think that IOUs don't have capacity fees. They don't have capacity fees because they can't get them, because the WUTC doesn't allow that sort of thing. And it's bad timing too. We've got a rate increase coming up already, and that should cover the cost, as it always has. Rates and grants should be able to cover the cost of what we're doing. We shouldn't be adding additional fees, especially this type. It's not only is it regressive because it's doubly regressive because it affects the housing and the electricity too. There's some misconceptions, I think, going on, especially about conservation.
Roger, you're at 3 minutes.
Already? This is expert testimony. Is this a hearing or not?
Can you wrap it up?
Well, sure. One of your misconceptions is that raising rates is a bad idea, that because people will use electricity, raising rates is not productive. And would that were true, because that's where your conservation has to come from. And if it was just price and demand, that would make sense. But all of the factors that affect the elasticity of demand are what is the factor you need to be looking at.
Okay,
Not
I'm gonna have you stop for now, Roger. You'll have more bites at the apple because this one's gonna be coming back. Do we have any other hands up to make a comment or a question?
Does not appear as though we do.
Okay. Do we have any more? So Commissioner Collins has, expressed a preference for about half of what's, Ken, did you say half of what's shown here, which is 80%, or half of what FCS recommended?
Yes, the latter, half of what FCS identified as the maximum allowable.
Okay. I'm just going to ask, so at the top of that column on that comparison where it says Jefferson, could you add, make the print smaller or put in a taller thing or whatever, just say 80% of FCS rate, and then could you make another column that would be 50% of the FCS rate?
Right.
And then if Jimmy can come up with the numbers for approximately how many, if we could then see, best estimate of what we could expect in terms of revenue from these programs with those two different rates, in addition to the question about the impacts to the EV fast chargers. Does that seem doable?
Works for me.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any other requests for information for the next time this comes back to us?
Did we need any more, excuse me, clarity on low income? We're going to approach low income?
Where are we at with low income? I didn't see that in the pages that we just looked at today.
It's not addressed.
That was one of the topics that Joel was going to be looking into and
Okay.
to think it over, and then, as I
Yeah,
said,
long as it's still on the radar.
It-
That's for staff.
yes.
Yeah, so I guess please add a page on that, because we talked about that pretty extensively last time, and I thought staff actually had a recommendation last time, and I thought Joel concluded that it was within our ability to adopt differential rates.
I think he was, yes, I think he was leaning strongly that that would be okay. I think there was some nuance, and I'm kind of forgetting what the nuance was now, that he wanted to consider a little further.
Well, we took that, there was that brief discussion on should there be the senior discount thing. No, it was the income of the person, not
That was the difficulty.
not attaching it to the, this house is being reserved for people with this income category, and instead having it be, no, this is a market rate house, but it just so happens that the person building the house can, and I think we rejected that one as not being, so I think that one probably needs to stay out of the box. It got kicked out.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So staff feels like you've gotten feedback. Do you think you'll bring that back at the next meeting, or do you have a timeline at this point when you think you'll bring it back, or you'll just let us know when it's coming back?
TBD, we're not sure that Joel will be back, so
Okay.
we'll let you know.
Okay. I think we're progressing on this. This is big stuff. I know, Dan, you want to get us to adoption. I think we have to be deliberate with this. I don't think we're saying we don't need this. I think, I know Roger has his point of view, and others may come to the meetings more as we continue to talk about this, because we have had some comments in the past.
Yeah, this has budget implications. It has capital improvement, implications. It has a whole lot of different components. The cost of service study. There's a lot of things that are kind of waiting on this, I think, is the way that I would say it.
Right. Yeah, and it won't get easier, if we wait till the fall, the pattern gets jammed up. So I'm hoping we can continue to work on this so we can have a final kind of proposal, and then we probably need, this is big enough, we probably need a public hearing or a meeting kind of dedicated to people fully understanding, and some press out there of what we're planning to do, as opposed to adopting it and then having the tidal wave come in afterwards. Might as well hear about it before we adopt it. Okay, if nothing else on that one, can we move on to new business, new projects presentation 9.1?
Will's bringing up a couple things. This has been sent out to the commissioners. This is what we used a couple weeks ago in Washington, DC. Part of our discussions with our legislature and the Navy is how to become more resilient on Indian Island, and how that affects Marrowstone and others on our service grid. One of the options that the Navy has requested would be, could we do a new feed over to the island that did not attach to the bridge? The bridge over to the island is considered a point of single failure, and we do not want that. So when we looked at putting a new substation in about at the paper mill, it led itself to an underwater cable to Indian Island. So that's what this is showing, is the new substation, top left red, then underground cable, solid yellow down and to the right, and then 2.7 miles of underground cable to Indian Island. We would receive funding for this through a couple different opportunities, and through possibly an appropriation if it would get to the point on the Navy crucial infrastructure. So there's a question how this helps Marrowstone Island. And so just briefly, for example, we have a water line that we supply water to the base. It actually goes all the way through Indian Island and then crosses under the water to the far end of Marrowstone Island. And that's how, for a long time, that's how Marrowstone Island on the upper side received all their water, is through a feed through the Navy base. The same thing would happen on the power. we could feed through the existing power lines, come out either our existing meter, which would get it across the water, the bridge, if there's a failure. But we've also looked at a possible following the same water line where we would throw in some underground cable between the base and Maristone. Some of the key infrastructure issues that we're going to bring to the commission in the near future is voltage problems. Voltage problems are caused by the size of wire, the distance away from your load. There's a lot of reasons we have voltage issues. And if we can pull load away from Maristone Island feed, Indian Island feed, do some additional work, that will be key for Maristone Island and get our voltage where we need to be. We also have Maristone Island where we have a lot of issues with outages and trees. If you have multiple sources, it brings restoration quicker, not to everyone, but to the bulk of the island, you can come on quicker. So there's some huge benefits, not only to the PUD, if we can get some funding for these projects, but for Indian Island. Next slide. We're zooming in a little bit here. The red substation, we have approached the county to see about purchasing that property. They have agreed to purchasing it, but we were supposed to keep our footprint as small as possible. We received drawings today about how we can align our substation on there. Once we finalize that design, then we'll go back to the county. We will say, okay, we need X feet on both pieces of property. That will come back to the commissioners for purchase of property. We're hoping that we could bring that back within a month, maybe 6 weeks to the commission for approval to work with the county on the property.
Kevin, the potential grants, maybe through the Navy, with the purchase of the property, would that something that we could recover through the grant, or is that like an in-kind type of a match? I mean, is there any chance of working the purchase of the property into any of the Navy grants, or is it going to be a standalone type of a thing for the utility?
So purchase of the property is key for this project to move forward. And so we would probably purchase the property out of hand. A lot of grants, you can't go retro. I don't know, Dan, on your question. Maybe we could. This substation location, though, was designated based on the need to upgrade the Hastings substation, the Irondale substation, and to get power across to the Cape George and Hastings Road. It wasn't designed for the Navy. It just fits in that part of the scenario.
Kevin, looking at the whole project, do you have a ballpark idea of what the cost will be?
I worked on the cost of the substation alone
Yes.
today based on the drawings I've received. The substation, the red box, is approximately $9 million. I'm at 8.8, but I still have to finalize some numbers. That is just one of 4 substation upgrades we need to do. And this isn't a substation upgrade. This is a brand new station. So I have not done the calculations yet for the underground and the undersea cable. We do know Josh Garlock was at a meeting, and some neighboring utilities are looking at purchasing undersea cable. If we would be fortunate enough to get some funding, we would jump in on that purchase, so that we would purchase the cable once they tool up and start building it. And that may save some money, but for the underwater cable, we're still looking at costs and how that would work into the grants moving forward. So at least 9 million for just the red box. I would throw, I won't even throw out a guess. I will have that for the next meeting. What
Okay,
it would cost.
fair enough.
Again, the substation itself is really geared only for infrastructure for the PUD, not the Navy. The next part of the presentation is we do feel there's a good option to get some funding for some generation on the existing pipeline. We've had very good feedback from the Navy and other people that are very familiar with a lot of the new federal grants for reliability, for a lot of reasons. This generation looks like we can move it forward. We're looking here at like a 1 megawatt generator. Ultimately, we talked originally about 3 megawatts, but the Navy has talked about possibly helping with additional generation on that line. They're similar to what Commissioner Randall said, they're looking to be carbon free. So if they could participate in a project like that and then they would get the power from the generation, then it would put them at a carbon free base.
So to put it into context and scale, Kevin, the generation that would come out of this, there's a potential for the ferry going in down at the, in Port Townsend, the electric ferry. A megawatt of power generates to how many homes or, that sort of thing. You want to give a little bit of context as to what this generation can do for us.
So there's a couple screens a little bit further on where we actually talk about this generation would be instrumental in us being able to feed the new ferry system. If they electrify the ferry in Port Townsend, we need approximately 3 megawatts. If we have 3 megawatts of hydropower, it will not change our high water mark for BPA, which means we can have decent rates. We're not going into the tier 2. It will help all of our customers not having to absorb some of those costs. So we feel for the ferry that the 3 megawatts, and that's where we started at, is the 3 megawatts is to hit just the ferry alone. I'm going to go down a little bit different. With the ferry system, we would also have a battery, 3 megawatt battery system, so that when the ferry plugged in, they could charge the ferry and it would not take our power down at all at the Dana Roberts substation. It would, so the pipeline power would keep the batteries charged, but also if we lost our transmission, we could run other key things with the battery and the water pipe power, such as the hospital and other key infrastructure could be ran with this project that we're proposing with the city of Port Townsend, the county, the paper mill. The ferry system becomes part of it just because we have to be able to supply them power. But it does feed a lot of the mandates that the state's trying to do. And it gives us some flexibility during, major power outages. If we lose a transmission line, we would have some power on the peninsula that we wouldn't otherwise. Right now, for the hydro project, we're looking at a little over $22 million. We are looking for funding for this project to the point we will probably do another trip to Washington DC, try to sit down with the Navy and others trying to solidify some dollars. We have Will here who has been awesome in getting grants for broadband and some other projects that he will be working on this, trying to go down many different avenues. The one thing I will say, the project with the Navy and other people that I've talked to, it meets a lot of the criteria that people want to do today. So I believe it, there's a, good chance that we can put something together. It will take a lot of work from everyone, but we have a good option here. I don't think there's another slide, is there, Will? Oh, this shows kind of the 3 turbines, 1 megawatt each, goes to the Dana Roberts substation, hits the battery storage. And then you can see where the ferry system, Jefferson Healthcare, EOC, could all be fed from this project. We do have, and I'll put Will on the spot. Do you want to talk about the grant you're working on for the Navy coming out of Chimicum Substation?
Yeah, so we've applied for a grant in the past. It's the Defense Community Infrastructure Program. We put in an application years ago to expand our Chimicum substation to have 2 bays. And it would help us supply more secure power to both the Indian and Marrowstone Island. We were not awarded our first application, I think it was put in 2020. The Navy has approached us this year about putting in a new application. This would provide them underground power, dedicated distribution feeder from Chimicum out to the island, reduce their reliability or reduce their reliance on their diesel generators. So we're in the process of putting that project together, working with Jimmy, working with I never remember.
ICPE?
ICPE, yeah. I'm getting the cost estimate, the application June 14th. We're looking at $7-8 million, I believe, or more, or 10. Yeah. So that would include a 2nd bay of the substation and the new underground feeder. Is that anything else, Jimmy, that would include in there?
That's it.
Yeah, that's all of it. And we've been piecing together parts of that new underground distribution line. So it is a shovel-ready project, and we do have previous plans that we're adapting for the new application. So it would be built out in the next 2 years if we were successful. What we talked about with the Navy, because they are enthused about these projects that Kevin and the team has put together, is trying to do this as a 3-phase project. And the first phase would be the expanded substation, the new dedicated feeder. 2nd phase would be the undersea cable, and 3rd phase would be the hydro generation and battery storage project. And as Kevin mentioned, we'd be looking for different routes of funding for those next phases, some of which may be appropriations, some of which may be other grants that come up, but all of which will be improved by award for the 1st phase and also the completion of our feasibility study that was funded by the Department of Commerce. We're still waiting for our contract on that. I've been going back and forth with Commerce. We expect to have a contract within the next month or 2.
So when we were in DC, beyond the Navy, there seemed to be a lot of optimism and support by the Northwest delegation in DC, to work with us and help us with this. So I won't use the term strike while the iron's hot, because I don't know that's appropriate at this point in time, but it did seem like that there was a lot of momentum starting to build behind doing these type of projects and other related type of projects. So just throwing my 2 cents in there that, when we were in DC, I came back very optimistic of what I heard back there. So now the state, the legislature, the governor and that, as far as the ferry component and where things will go with that, I don't know what the state's role will be to play in this. They need to play a role if we're going to do some of this work on their behalf for an electric ferry. So I'm hoping that that's another avenue that we'll be able to do a little more work on that. I don't know if that's staff or if that's commissioners or, you know, where that falls. But at some point, I think we do need to have a little bit of emphasis of what the state's part of funding this is going to look like.
Well, I like that. I think staff has outlined this really logically, and I appreciate that you've reached out to the Navy, and it seems like they've been looking for opportunities to work with the community, and this resiliency idea, it helps them decarbonize, it helps them become more resilient, it helps us as a community deal with the potential impacts of BPA doesn't have any more tier 1 power, of keeping us out of tier 2 and more expensive power longer, and helping us with resiliency, and helping us with some of the costs of these upgrades to our electric infrastructure that we're going to need. So I really like this, and it gives the commissioners, gives us something tangible that when we talk to whoever, people at the state or people at the federal level, of how they can help us. So I think you've done a nice job framing this. One question I had, could you go back to the slide of the underwater cable going across Port Townsend Bay? What do we know about any challenges or difficulties of getting these kinds of projects permitted from the various agencies? Because I'm assuming we're crossing a bunch of different jurisdictions there. And could the Navy and federal agencies, could they in any way help us with any of that permitting?
Yes, we have started to look at permitting. Ideally, you want to go in a no anchor zone. This little path is not necessarily a no anchor zone, or it's a suggested no anchor zone. So there's a lot of things we're working on, Jeff, on permitting. Everyone we've talked to has said that the Navy can help us with this. It is a very, for us, it would be a unique project, but for example, the San Juan Islands use it all the time. There's neighboring utilities that have underwater cable. Huge challenges, you know, the permitting will be one of them, but with everyone behind the project, I think it would be a easier go than if we tried to do it just by ourselves.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think they're pointing out some reasons why it's a very good idea, that right now they kind of have a bottleneck of service going over the bridge, and this provides a second route for power out there. And I think, you know, staff, as you did your presentation, you talked more about how this helps the entire community from a resiliency perspective. I think we need to keep talking that up because it's really clear in how it benefits the Navy, but I think we need to keep a balanced approach of how this potentially helps us as a community too. So, but really nice job. And
even the Navy, Jeff, that's part of the equation for them as well. And obviously, there's national security implications, decarbonization issues, but they also, part of their mission is to look at the community, how it helps with jobs, how it helps the community in general. And this checks a lot of boxes for the Navy, above and beyond the Navy's needs. So I think there's a lot of synergy in these two projects combining and moving forward.
No, I agree. It's a way they can give back, and they've been here for a long time, and most communities with significant Navy or military assets see direct funding assistance with community projects. We've not really seen that yet, and I think this is a good opportunity for that to happen. So staff, you're not looking for any commissioner action at this point?
More just get this out for not only the commissioners, but for the public so that we can discuss it.
Okay, and again, the only thing I would say is we're talking to the public, make sure we balance this so it doesn't, because a person could look at this on the face of it, say, oh, we're doing all this stuff for the Navy. It's like, no, they're part of it, you know, and they're a big part of hopefully helping to fund it. But the need, it's a community-wide need, and it's a community-wide assist in terms of helping us. So I think just keep that approach in mind.
I think that this is a very exciting project. I think it's very forward-facing. If we can get the money, it's something we should do. I think that might be a big if, but Navy has a lot of pull, so we'll see what happens.
And it's a significant base for them. You know, when you look at the operations that the Navy has, it's an important facility, and they're very serious. They look at carbon emissions as a national security risk. So decarbonizing for them and energy security is a national security issue for them.
Going back to Roger's earlier comments about grants, grants for the electric side of thing, water's bad, electric sometimes can be even worse, especially with the legislation on, how they're manufactured transformers, pole attachments, a whole lot of other issues that go in the electric side of things. But this is a way for us to get some grant money and check a whole lot of boxes for the Navy, for the community, for the utility. So again, I think we should really be taking advantage of the opportunity right now to check all the boxes and keep moving with this one.
Agreed. So was there any public who wanted to ask questions or comment on this item? I see a hand.
Roger again.
Go ahead, Roger. You got 3 minutes.
I'm unmuted. Okay. What kind of generation is Indian Island planning long term?
Is that your entire comment and question?
Well, I'm curious about small nuclear reactors.
Staff, I haven't heard that they're proposing any generation on Indian Island. Has staff heard that?
When we've talked to staff at the Navy does not want to own or operate the generators we're proposing. They want the PUD to own, operate them. They want the clean power.
And they're not proposing any other sources of power generation.
No, not with this project.
Their diesel generators are for backup purposes only, I would imagine, redundancy on the island itself.
Yeah. So Roger, it sounds like there have been no discussions that we're aware of small modular nukes on Indian Island.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. All right, is there any other public questions or comments? Not seeing any. Commission, do we have any other questions or comments?
No.
Okay. Well, this is, again, really good work. And this is a kind of collaborative thing that takes a lot of effort and it takes time. And especially with the Navy, for me, the thing I see with the Navy, it takes a lot of energy to get them moving. And once you get that inertia, it's like, don't let up. Keep it up. Keep this thing going. Treat it as a fire. Keep feeding it, because I think they're an organization that if we don't, and I'm not hearing anything saying that we're not going to, but if we lose inertia on this, they can forget about it. And it's like all the effort to get this thing going could be lost. So please keep at it diligently. Okay, well, we have reached the end of the agenda. So unless anybody has, yeah, we did cover everything in that 9.1. Does anybody have anything else? Hearing none, seeing none. It's 5:54 and I will declare us adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night.